This, what you are currently watching right now, has been one of the weirdest experiences of my life. And my very first YouTube video was posted on October 24th, 2023. And this week, we're gonna get to October 24th, 2024. And in that 1 year's time, my life has felt like it's completely turned all the way upside down in the most scary and visceral way that I can possibly describe. As of making this outline, I have 93,000 followers on Instagram, I have 279,000 followers on TikTok, and on YouTube, it's very similar to TikTok, I have 278,000 subscribers on YouTube. My YouTube videos have been viewed a combined 152 million times in the last year. And so today I wanted to have a video just kind of marking that 1 year anniversary of posting on YouTube. It also happens to be my birthday weekend, so last year in October I turned 31, and this year in October I'm turning 32. And so to mark the 1 year anniversary, I just wanted to first celebrate and just be happy for all that has happened with the channel in the last year, but also just to share kind of what it's been like for me behind the screen, from the panic attacks to what it's like to have emails and DMs and comments of people saying I'm the Antichrist and wishing I was not alive. If you've been following my story, you know that I started all of this because I wanted to write a book. That is where all of this began, was wanting to write a book. I've always wanted to be an author. Even growing up in the church, I chose to be a teacher instead of going into being an author like my real dream was. And so this channel kind of started with my idea to write a book, and then has very much turned into its own thing that has kind of weirdly taken the reins of my life in a very unexpected way. I certainly never thought that I would be holding one of these. I'm really grateful for this, but at the same time, it's been really scary and lonely and melancholy. And so I wanted to just have a video that was not just about Mormonism in general, but also just a video about what it's been like to so publicly criticize the church, personally what it's been like being an online person that has millions of views coming in. I never wanted to be, quote, like internet famous. I never had a dream growing up of, you know, being a YouTuber. And so this year I turned 32. I left the church 8 years ago. I got married in a Mormon temple 9 years ago. I was serving a mission about 10 years ago. If missionary me could see myself now, I would cry for days. And so just the emotional impact of what it's been like to go from a garment-wearing, Book of Mormon carrying Mormon missionary to wearing the temple clothes on a video to then post online has been so I'm literally struggling for the words to describe it. It's been very weird. The weirdest part, I think, has been to be so simultaneously loved and supported and applauded for talking about these things, while also simultaneously being hated and have people just berating me with, I'm a bad person and I'm a disappointment to my family and I should be ashamed of myself. And putting videos on the internet, which is the same video, that has so much love, and video of the same video can get so much hate, and dealing with that and finding myself in the center of that and knowing who I am despite these two massive tidal waves of people who are vehemently opposed to each other's conclusion on how this content should be taken has been just inexplicably strange. And as I talk about this, if it's possible, I would like you to think about this not like I'm a YouTuber, but like putting yourself in my shoes, if this happened to you, what it would be like, especially if you are coming from a situation where you've maybe had some experience disappointing your community, because I think that that will help maybe carry through the strangeness of it all, because maybe by now, if you see me talking, it doesn't maybe feel like maybe I don't feel like a real person. Maybe I'm just the talking head of somebody who talks a lot about Mormon stuff all the time. But a year ago, I just had, my normal social media with pictures of my kids and my normal day-to-day experience of walking through the world. And, now sometimes people do actually recognize me, and it's weird as hell. But maybe putting yourself in my shoes might help carry my message through, because even though maybe I do just seem like a YouTuber, an actual, like I have this thing in my house, like maybe it seems like I'm just not human anymore. Sometimes people definitely don't treat me like I'm human in comments and how they approach me as a kind of public figure, I suppose. It's definitely not like they're perceiving there's a person of flesh and bone behind this facade of this digital interface that's brought us together, but I am real. And so as I share, I would love for whoever's watching to just try to think about what it would be like for them, because primarily I would just like to humanize myself a little bit at the outset of this video. I have been recognized kind of in the wild 3 times since making my content, and 2 of the times was I went to Austin City Limits, a music festival, which is a lot of people. So that day I had 2 people come up to me and say, "Hey, I watch your content, nice to meet you." By this point, essentially every friend or acquaintance I've had in my life has essentially come across my content. I've probably had about 200 different people, from past teachers to past people from high school or middle school or college or whatever, past jobs, reach out to me and say, "Hey, the algorithm served your video to me." So at this point, basically everyone I know has come across my content. I've never been recognized in Utah, but I get really anxious, honestly, going to Utah. I know it sounds absurd, but honestly, I think it's not totally unwarranted that I do kind of wear a disguise. It's not a true disguise, but I don't look like this. This is how I look in videos. When I go to Utah, I wear my big glasses, I always wear a hat and a big hoodie, and I put my hair up, and it's not, I'm not putting on like a mustache disguise, but I definitely don't want to look like I usually do in videos, because I do get anxious going to Utah. For example, the first time I flew out to Utah after going semi-viral online, I didn't even want to sit at my gate, because I was worried that if I was sitting at the gate for Salt Lake, people would recognize me and maybe come up and say, "Hey, I hate you, you're a bad person." I've talked to John Dehlin about this. John Dehlin has been publicly criticizing the church for about 20 years. He was excommunicated for publicly criticizing the church, and he said he's never really had someone in public just be ultra rude to him. It's more like his acquaintances or people from his old wards that have frosted him out and stopped talking to him. The difference being, though, John Dehlin has never, at least to my knowledge, dressed up in the temple clothing. And the temple clothing, if you're Mormon, that truly is the most offensive thing that I could do. As far as offending a Mormon goes, showing the temple clothing and talking about the temple clothing, showing the handshakes, showing the symbols within the garment, all of those things are truly the most offensive level that you could get to talking about being ex-Mormon. If you're criticizing, the church's structure, or if you're saying Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet, or the Book of Mormon is made up, all of those things are still offensive, and Mormons would disagree with you on it. But showing the temple clothes, which I've now done quite a bit in my content, and I'll talk about why that's so important to me in a bit, showing the temple clothes, though, is truly so offensive that I'm afraid that someone would hurt me if they saw me in public, especially in Utah, where there's a very high concentration. Now, aside from comments, which sometimes I do get scary comments, I've never had an experience that would lead me to believe that that would happen to me, but I feel anxious or worried enough about it that I do feel like it is within the realm of possibility, but I'd also sometimes this whole thing has made me feel very like I'm a crazy person and I'm overreacting. And so I'll just also share that has been a big element of what this has been like for me. And keep in mind, for my never Mormon listeners, prior to the 90s, you used to have to promise to literally, well, yourself, if you talked about what happened in the temple. You pantomimed, I'll put a graphic here, basically disemboweling yourself to say that that's what you would do if you revealed the secrets of the temple. And so when I say it's taboo, most of the people who, are my parents' age and older, at one point did have to promise that they would do that. I went through the temple and did the ceremony and received my endowment after they got rid of that part. So technically, first of all, I'm not under that same promise. Not that I would do that, even if I was under that promise, but the level to which, especially people who are in the older generations, see what I'm doing as so horrible is because they do remember that there was a time that they had to promise that was the severity of revealing the secrets of the temple. And so that's another reason, an element that I think it's been so important to me to talk about the temple, and something that I feel like is crucial to me sharing about my Mormon experience is just being excruciatingly honest with what I went through as part of going through the temple and what it was like for me, and connecting with a lot of other people who share similar sentiments. But putting on those temple clothes and sitting in front of the camera is truly one of the most offensive things I could do at all. And maybe it's because of the specific content that I talk about, which is criticizing religion, criticizing a very religion where there are many, many hyper devout people who take it very seriously as the most important thing of their life. But often, I think internet fame is posed as something that's supposed to be really exciting and really desirable and something that is glitzy and glamorous and sparkling. And so sometimes maybe going into this, as this was happening to me, I feel like it's something that almost happened to me and not something that I did, even though I'm the one posting the videos. As this is all going down, it has not been, this glamorous, happy-go-lucky, I'm so excited kind of thing. It's really been very fraught with a lot of unhappiness and a lot of guilt and a lot of sadness. To some extent, that is because I've chosen a niche of something to talk about that obviously is not just, it's not lifestyle content. It's not just, here's get ready with me. It's not, I'm not famous for a pop song. But honestly, I think even if you do get those versions of fame, when you listen to them talk about, what it's like to go viral for X, Y, or Z, or to get famous for X, Y, or Z, all of them express sentiments that are basically, hey, this was kind of a mixed bag, and I didn't just love it unconditionally necessarily. I think the biggest way this has impacted me is just how my family has reacted. When you leave the church, you're already kind of the black sheep. I just know, I knew that when I left, I would never be as good in the eyes of my family. I would just never quite be accepted at the same level. And that was a choice that I made when I left, was to just know they're never gonna be as proud of me as they would have had I stayed in the church. However, that's what I accepted when I left, and I was quiet. Because when I first left, I made a little Facebook post that was basically like, hey everybody, I've decided I'm leaving the church. This is the best path for me. And even posting about it on Facebook was something that created a lot of unhappiness within my circle of people. And it was seen as being almost anti-Mormon that I would even talk about it publicly. I think the only acceptable way to leave and to still kind of be welcomed to your family is to be totally quiet. To just kind of fade into oblivion. Not that you're uninvited from your family, just that to be kind of loved in the same way, or kind of mostly the same way, with as few caveats as possible, is to just stop talking about the church at all. And a lot of people choose that route, or they just never tell their parents. They just, you know, I've known people who they still have garments so that when they go home, they just wear garments at home so that their parents still think they're practicing. And so even just by posting that on Facebook, I was already being more public than was preferred. If you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. I really appreciate everyone who's subscribed to the channel. Drop a comment or a question below if you have a question about anything of what it's been like for me to have this wild experience happen in my life. Everything I ever express on camera are opinions I've held essentially since I left the church. These are opinions I've had about, you know, viewpoints, beliefs, whatever, about the church, basically since I left, but I have just been more or less mute about it since I decided to leave. I get so many questions about my family and how they've reacted to me leaving and then to this channel, and that's been the hardest thing for me to talk about, purely because I'm just glad my family is still talking to me. I did tell them I was writing this book. I told them in a letter and got kind of mixed responses from different family members. But honestly, a book is still kind of a quiet way to talk about the church. Making viral TikTok videos is much more public than having a book that's available on Amazon. And so as my family has kind of come across my content, I feel like, honestly, I'm just grateful they're still willing to talk to me, because there was a while that I honestly thought that if and when, because the bigger it got, you know, at first I thought I could kind of keep it quiet. The bigger it's gotten, the more it's been kind of inevitable that they would come across the videos, and I kind of felt like maybe there was a chance that when they found the videos that they would want to stop talking to me. And I feel really grateful that, honestly, all of them now know it's a thing, know it's kind of existing in the world, and they still are choosing to have me in their lives. And it's definitely been the hardest part of this year, is to just know that to say what I really think and to be honest about what I think should be, you know, said about the church and about my experience and the temple and, you know, my mission and all of these things. It's definitely been challenging to know that I was doing that potentially at the cost of my family. Thankfully, though, so far my family has still not just been willing to talk to me, but still been very loving. We kind of had, with each of my family members, I had basically just one single conversation about this channel, and then we went back to just being completely silent on the matter, and I don't really talk to them about it. It's been strange because, you know, like, when I got this, you know, it's really bittersweet, because I would love to just be able to snap a selfie of this and send it in the family chat, but that's not something that I've done, obviously, because I just don't want it to be kind of in their faces any more than it already is. I already brought up John Dehlin because he's kind of someone that's experienced something similar, and I actually knew about John Dehlin when I was still a full believing member of the church, and I had multiple people who would refer to him as the Antichrist. And that is, I don't know if that is something that's a common phrase in all of Christianity, but it is in Mormonism. And there's a character in the Book of Mormon that's called, his name is Korihor, and he leads a lot of people away, and he's the Antichrist. And growing up in the church, I would hear about that, you know, the Antichrist, or different people who were Antichrists. In addition to Korihor in the Book of Mormon, there are other Antichrists in the Book of Mormon, and so this is kind of one of the worst things you can call people. And John Dehlin was called an Antichrist, and by members of my family as well. And so, you know, as I'm making videos, I very much have the dialogue of what people said about John Dehlin, and knowing that what they said about him is what they also, you know, my community, my circle, what they believe, at least maybe to some extent about me, probably just a little bit more fraught and confused because I'm also a daughter, a sister, a niece, you know, to all these people who now have to kind of grapple with the idea that someone in their actual family is doing what John Dehlin once did, but John Dehlin was such a far off figure that maybe it just felt easier to call him the Antichrist than it is to call your own family that. There was an instance where John Dehlin actually was invited to a wedding that I was also invited to because he also knows a lot of ex-Mormons, and ex-Mormons often end up being, you know, they're still friends with the Mormons and they're all going to maybe the same funerals or weddings or whatever the social event is. And so basically some of the gossip at this wedding was basically that some of the people had chosen not to attend because this anti-Mormon person was going to be there. And so I do worry as time goes on, you know, this is still, I'm just in the first year of all of this, and I worry that as time goes on, you know, there will probably come a day where there will be a wedding or a funeral or something of that nature where someone I love will have an event in their life and I'll get a call of that person's significant other, and they will probably say like, hey, you know, we love you, but we would like you to not attend for this event. And I just know like that's the deal I've made, right? By doing this, by putting on the temple clothes and by deciding to take this path, it really sucks. I can't say what I believe without having that come along with it. And I recognize that this is just the bargain I've made, that as soon as I decided I was going to do this, that as soon as I decided, hey, I actually have a lot to say, you know, I have something to say, I would like to raise my hand, that once I decided to raise my hand, I was going to have a lot of people hate me. I was going to have a lot of people be really upset, but most of all that I was going to have the disappointment of my family that would be hanging over me for the rest of my life. And you know, I do still, I have a lot of people who ask me, how do you get a family member to leave? And I really wish I could tell you that. I wish that I had the answer to that. Because part of me does still hope that that's gonna be the case for my family, and maybe, you know, once that does happen, they'll be able to celebrate some of this with me. And maybe then they'll watch it, and like part of me, you know, I'm making my, sorry to get emotional, I'm making my little outline for the video, tearing up a bit, and it just fantasizing, you know, or thinking about these two realities, one of which, you know, my family stays in the church and I'm uninvited from a funeral, or I'm uninvited from a wedding. And then I'm also thinking, you know, desperately hoping for this other reality where maybe my family leaves, you know, and then I'm the prodigal son, except, you know, not in a religious context. And I kind of get to have this with them. I get to celebrate all of this with them. And you know, in the same way that so many people, you know, celebrate my videos in comments, I'll get to have that with my own family. And so part of me has these two futures in my mind, and, you know, maybe I still think someday maybe my family will watch this. And I'll be watching it with them and we'll cry together, you know. And maybe that's why I wanted to make this video too, because sometimes I just make the videos and I'm just like happy and cheery and I explain my things and I have my sarcastic moments and my funny moments, and then like I lay on my bed and feel sad, and I feel like it almost is inauthentic to not also explain that this is a massive part. This is probably like the kind of melancholy sadness is probably more of my lived experience in all of these videos, you know? That's probably more true to what it's actually been like. But when I make the videos too, I do want to bring a little bit of my other part of myself, which is happy and, you know, complex and wants to talk about difficult things. And I've never said something in a video that I don't still stand by. I'm not ashamed of what I believe. I'm not ashamed of any of this. I'm just sad that it means that my relationship with my family is significantly more tense than it would be if I just could keep my mouth shut about some of this. Along with that, I think it feels important to share just that when I have made these videos, the biggest ask of people in my circle who are still members has been to not ever talk about the temple or to take down the stuff where I've talked about the temple. And two, I mean, every time I post about the temple on this, where I have TikTok, every time I post about the temple, my videos get flagged because people report them so much. And I sometimes I just imagine, you know, it's probably AI that just responds to those flags, but sometimes I just imagine, you know, TikTok is owned obviously by a Chinese company, so I just imagine some person in an office, some Chinese person in an office who just gets this and has to manually review if it's offensive material, and it's just me in the temple clothes, and they are like, what is offensive about this? I don't get it. Because most people don't understand why this would be so offensive unless they are actually from the religious tradition. To me, the temple was such a massive part of me questioning the church, and such a massive part of me feeling like it was not what I had been led to believe that it was, that to leave that out of my story and to leave that out of my content. I mean, in my book, the very first chapter is about how much I hated the temple endowment. And from the outfits to, I think the biggest word I can use to describe how it felt was I felt betrayed. I just felt that I had grew up with pictures of temples in my bedroom. I grew up with pictures of temples in every room of my house. I grew up singing, I love to see the temple, I'm going there someday. I grew up, you know, drawing temples. And I truly believed that going to the temple would be the most singular, most transformative experience, most amazing spiritual experience of my entire life. And to go and to do the handshakes and to wear the clothing and then to stand at the veil while a woman whispered in my ear a secret code, you know, about blessings in the loins and the bosom, and while a man sticks his hand, you know, this is how it is. An old man usually sticks his hand through at waist level through a curtain, and you have to hold his hand, and then there's two more holes, and he grabs you from one side. You're supposed to basically do a hug while handshaking and say these words. And nothing about it at all felt spiritual. Nothing at all about it felt special. I remember as I'm veiling my face, having to promise to obey my husband, and at that point I wasn't even married yet, I hadn't even met my husband, and just feeling like even in the temple, even in what's supposed to be the most spiritual experience of my life, I have to promise to obey my husband. That was one of the most frustrating moments, where Eve has to covenant with her husband. And you know, that bothered so many people that they've now taken it out. And if you can take out portions of what's supposed to be the most sacred spiritual, you know, ceremony of this religious experience that's handed from Joseph Smith, it's like how they just changed the garments. I'm sorry I'm going on a tangent here, but they just changed the garments to be tank top garments. And you know, not all the garments, it's gonna probably come in slowly over time, but now you can order garments that would allow you to wear a tank top. And all of these changes don't feel exciting. They wouldn't have even felt exciting to me as a member. They just feel like a slap in the face because you knew it was wrong all along. You knew it was fucked up all along, and you're changing it because you're bowing to social pressure. You're not changing it because of a revelation, so stop lying, please. So anyways, I know that choosing to talk openly about the temple and showing pictures of the garments and showing the temple clothing, I know that that's offensive, but I feel that being dragged into that a week before I was supposed to serve my mission and being told that that was the most spiritual experience and being asked to wear garments so that I would remember that temple ceremony day and night for the rest of my life. And I just feel that to not talk about that would be so disingenuous that I should not even embark on the path of talking about my experience as a Mormon if I'm not willing to broach the subject of what happens in a temple, and that lots and lots of people come out and either leave the church or they just almost never return to the temple because they find the experience to be so reprehensible. I think one of the most difficult parts is grappling with the idea that so many people think you're a bad person for talking about the church. So many, you know, from commenters to my family to just saying, hey, you suck. You're a bad person if you do this. It's really hard to not let that get to you. You know, I don't think I'm a bad person necessarily. I mean, I think I'm a flawed person. I don't think I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't say that I am necessarily a bad person. But when enough people, like I said, if you're putting yourself in my shoes, if enough people are screaming in comments, and it feels like screaming. I know it's not, they can't actually scream, it's just a comment, but it feels like so many voices rising up to scream at you, you're a bad person. It's really hard to just toss this to the side, especially when some of those voices are from people you love. You know, maybe that's subliminally, you know, I've never had a loved one actually say, you're a bad person. But I think sometimes maybe I infer those messages from the response to it all. It's really hard to hear that so often and to not internalize it a little bit. And maybe it's just my personality type, but it's very hard to hear all of that and to not internalize the angry comments way more than I internalize the happy comments. You know, when I get someone saying something really positive, I feel like it doesn't absorb into my soul in the same way the angry comments very much just reverberate through my entire body. And I think I honestly do have to just go back to knowing I really stand by everything I've said, and I really do stand by all of the short form videos, the long form videos. I research really carefully. You know, if you go to my original video, it's just me talking. It's why I started adding so many resources, because I would have people saying I'm lying, you're lying about this. So it's why I started adding articles and adding, you know, quotes from different people who are academics, or adding at least some resources so that I could say, look, I'm not the only one who's saying this. This is in papers, this is in Reddit threads, this is in whatever resource I can use to just show, hey, this is something that many people are expressing. I think too, in being so quiet in all those years, you know, when I left, I didn't really talk about it for the first 6 years. I had my little Facebook post where I came out of my ex-Mormon closet, and then I was, you know, fine to just kind of move. I moved to New York and just said, all of that's behind me. It's just something I'll bring up at the bar as kind of like my little parlor trick to be like, did you know I used to be in a cult? Ha ha ha. But I think I also just, as I grew past that phase of just wanting to escape this part of my past, I also just realized that by being silent, by not speaking up about this, that it felt kind of selfish, like closing the door behind you, like saying, hey, all of these people are still serving missions, all of these kids are still being raised in the church, all of these people are still paying 10% of their income and giving all of their time and all of their resources to the church, and they're just kind of out there doing their thing, and that's their choice, and I chose to leave, and that's my choice. And I think I've had people say that they chose not to serve a mission because of my videos, and I saved them years of their life. I am really proud of that. I literally saved them years of serving a Mormon mission and giving so much. When I was on my mission, I gave so much to this stinking fucking church that's not even true. And if I can save, one person from having to do that when they don't believe that it's true, and if I can present information that helps people make more informed choices about their lives. I've had a lot of people too who are queer, gay, trans, whatever, who have shared that it's been easier for them to leave, that they found a way to feel less lonely in their transition out of the church and to feel just less like they're dehumanized. The church really dehumanizes people who are LGBTQIA. And so to reach out and help those people who are trying to leave and feeling like they are the scum of the earth, like the church wants you to feel when you're gay and you're leaving the church. And I love that I've helped them. I think, I'm in a really lucky position where some people, they're in a position where they live with their parents. So if they speak out against the church, they wouldn't have a home anymore. Or if they speak out against the church, they would have to get divorced. And then their spouse, if their spouse is still a member. And I'm in a really lucky situation where I'm not financially dependent on members of the church. I have my own home. My living situation is not dependent on members of the church. I live in Texas. I don't have every single person on my block as someone who is a member of the church who is then going to refuse not let my kids play with them, like has happened to other people who are outspoken against the church who do still live in Utah. And so I feel that I know it would be easier to be silent. In many ways, it would be actually much easier to be silent about these things because I don't need the church. I don't actually have to have the church in my life. I got away from it for a reason. But to some extent, I just feel that if I can keep young people from having to serve and waste their time serving a mission, if I can keep young people from getting married ultra young and having a bunch of kids ultra young and then being stuck, being poor and unhappy, if they watch the videos and say, maybe I should date around a little bit before I get married at 18, maybe I should do some research into what it's like to have kids before I just choose not to go on birth control and then I'm married at 18, pregnant at 19, and then very much not really in control of a lot of aspects of my life by 20. And so I say all of this just to share that I do still very much believe in what I'm doing, and I really believe, I think of when I was leaving the church, I would listen to Mormon Stories by John Dehlin, and he's had some things in his life with his family, with his personal life, with his kids, like that he's actually sacrificed in order to be outspoken against the church. He was excommunicated, and I feel like if I didn't have resources of people who were able to not just kind of leave, but then after they left, to turn around and say, I'm going to help other people who are also stuck in this religious tradition. If I didn't have that, I think it would have been so much more lonely and so much more difficult. So I feel that the opportunity to now, in the same way others who are, content creators or YouTubers or podcasters did that for me when I left, I think it's really beautiful that I now have not just the opportunity to do that, but to do it on such a massive scale that sometimes when I see, a comment come in that's like, thank you so much, I've had people literally say, you've saved my life. And when I get those comments, I just I stick it in my heart and I say, okay, I know that I'm making some people who are close to me unhappy, and I'm not living up to what their dream was for me, but I know I'm doing that. I'm doing what someone did for me. I'm now turning around and I'm doing that for them. And I think, it's so bittersweet. This whole year has been incredibly bittersweet because I recognize that I am living in this paradigm of such hate and disappointment and such love and such being such a help to people who need help. And so living in the paradigm and being a human operating in the paradigm and waking up in my bed and seeing all these very diametrically opposed comments rolling in has been a lot to be in the middle of, that's for sure. I've also in the last year really practiced depersonalizing myself from what it is that all of this is, I think sometimes when people say I hate you or you're a bad person, especially early on, I really personalized it as they hate me, and they probably would say they hate me, but what I try to do in my mind is to just say there's a separation between the content I make, that they hate the video, but they can't possibly hate me because they don't even actually know me. They know the pixels and the dimensions and the upload of the airwaves of what it is I've created. That's what they hate. And that actually physically is not me. That is a separate entity. And they may very well say they do actually hate me, but I think in my mind, that's what I've done to kind of separate as these comments roll in that I struggle with not just very much personalizing. I can say they hate the product, they hate the video, they hate the short form 60 seconds that I produced, and but that ultimately they can argue with that, they can pick it apart, they can say I'm bad based on that, but ultimately it's literally just not the same as me. Even now, you're watching this video and this video will get uploaded and probably will exist on YouTube for years to come, and it's a moment in time that was captured using my camera, my microphone, with my little outline, but still it's fundamentally not the same as the physical form that I inhabit and my physical body. There's something that obviously gets thrown around quite a bit on the internet, which is to go touch grass, and sometimes I really literally do get up from my computer, I get up from my chair, I walk outside, and I breathe in the air, and I touch grass, and it does actually make me feel better. So, I think sometimes when we're so locked into screens and we're so locked into the virtual reality that if you just close it, it's almost like it doesn't exist. When I close it, like I said, I've only been recognized in public 3 times, but if I go online, I can see thousands of comments, hundreds of thousands of comments by now probably, and so I think touching grass is actually a very good lesson for people who are now chronically online in the way I am, because it allows you to step back from the reality that feels very real, but once you hit the power button, it ceases to exist entirely. I think too, one of my biggest saving graces in all of this has been my husband, and he's been nothing but supportive and loving. He's really good too about saying, okay, let's shut the computer now. It's, hey, let's take a step back. And I think I'm very lucky to have married someone that left the church with me and is now someone that's ultra supportive and just such a cheerleader for everything that I'm doing. And so I think, I spend so much time talking to him about video concepts and, well, I want to say this, but that doesn't feel quite right, so maybe I could reword it. And he's just been, in so many ways, such a superhero of my life. And I think, everyone deserves that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is how it feels like you're still a normal person, even though a lot of people who maybe who would watch my videos or who are familiar with me being online would say I'm not normal, or there's something now that's fundamentally shifted in the sense that now that I have numbers next to my name and they know my face, that I'm no longer normal. I had an experience where I went to a kind of ex-Mormon event in Utah, and I had some people who came, which if you're watching this and you came, awesome. It was great to meet you. But I had some people who came to see me who, when they met me, I could tell they were nervous, and they were nervous to meet me. Or I had another experience where I had an event in Utah where I did a book signing, and I came and so there were maybe 15 people already there, which was already just crazy that anyone even showed up. But as I'm walking in, hey, so great to meet you guys. What are your names? And everyone's sharing their names. And then it gets back to me and I said, well, my name's Alyssa. So great to meet you. And they all laughed like I was making a joke because of course they already knew my name. And it's weird to meet people for the first time and have them already know who you are. And it's been interesting now that I'm kind of experiencing this new life, I guess, to see, famous people who are legitimately famous. I've been following Chapel Roan for a while, and if you follow her, she had a whole video about how she's kind of getting upset that people are stalking her and following her around and asking for photos all the time. And she's kind of saying, I'm just some bitch, I'm just some girl, I'm just another person just like you. But then when you're watching it, you feel like, no, you're not just some person, you're Chapel Roan. You're so famous and you've made all this amazing music and I love your work and I've listened to every single song you've ever put out. And but she, as she's sitting there recording the video, holding her camera, talking to her phone, she does feel like she's super normal. And because I think to some extent her fame has been so rapid that it probably feels even more abnormal. And I'm not saying I'm as famous as her, but obviously I don't believe that. But I feel like seeing her express all of this and share all of this I feel like I'm able to, in a 0.0001% way, understand kind of what she's getting at, which is that having this experience doesn't feel like it does change you at all. It doesn't feel like you're different, but everyone does act differently towards you, or at least for her specifically. I think for me, it's still at a small enough scale that not everybody knows about it. I think too, if you have been following other kind of celebrity news, you probably saw that the One Direction member Liam Payne recently passed away at 31. It has not been officially declared that his death was a suicide, but it seems that a lot of evidence points in that direction. I don't know. But I think of what it must be like for him, what it must have been like for him to go from being relatively unknown to then an overnight smash success where millions of people are obsessing over their every single move. And then a few years pass and the world moves on and suddenly he's much less well known. And in the course of a decade, he essentially goes from being one of the world's biggest pop stars to kind of being someone that nobody is really following anymore. And it's incredibly sad what happened to him. And I think that it really shows how fame can just chew you up and spit you out on the other side. And having millions of people following your every move one minute and then no one following your every move the next minute, I think is very disorienting and obviously causes so many, fame, I think, causes so many people to have so many mental health issues. And it's obviously not just him. I think people from Anthony Bourdain, who I loved, Robin Williams, Marilyn Monroe, the list goes on, of people who seemed to have everything and then still are deeply unhappy, and probably for some of them have become even worse and more disturbed by their experience with being famous. When I've had some of my worst moments in kind of dealing with this YouTube and social media thing that I've been experiencing over the last year, it's really hard to not just doom scroll comments after comments of people kind of hating on you. And that is why I do not have any of the social apps on my phone. I put them all on an iPad, and I keep this iPad in a different room that I don't have with me at night and I don't have with me in the morning, just to put a wall up and not be doom scrolling all the time and not be looking at those comments all the time, because it can feel very loud in your own brain when you're having so many people say awful things about you. And I think that's why I feel so lucky to have my husband as someone who has really, you know, empowered me over the last year to keep going, and to, you know, there's been a lot of times where I've said, I'm just gonna stop posting videos because it's had such a big impact on me. And it reminds me kind of I've listened to some interviews from Billie Eilish with her brother Phineas, and he's really been kind of her big brother protector in a lot of ways. He's done music with her, and, you know, she went through a time of ideation, and he sat there with her. She has songs about it anyways. And I've cried while listening to her interviews, because I think, you know, there's like a Britney Spears situation where they literally don't have anyone. They get famous and they have people who are just kind of predatory off of their fame, off of their money. Their parents are predatory, their family, their agent, whatever. And you can see how if someone gets famous and they don't have a support system, it just completely eats them alive. But if they even have one person who just says, hey, like, I actually don't care that you're famous, I love you, I just love you. And I don't care if you have even more meteoric success, or if you're just my sister, or you're just my you know, child. There's people who say, hey, I actually, regardless of the ups and downs of your public image, I'm just here for you. I think that seems to be kind of a make it or break it for a lot of these people who I've, you know, kind of watched them throughout. You know, Lindsay Lohan is another one. I think when you grow up, you know, I think of a lot of celebrities like Selena Gomez, or people who I've kind of grown up with. I feel like Miley Cyrus, you know, these people are my age, give or take a few years, and I've kind of watched them. We've kind of I feel like it's a little parasocial, but I feel like I've grown up with them, and I've seen, you know, Miley Cyrus smoking, and Miley Cyrus having her comeback and being amazing, and it feels like a victory for me in some ways, because I get to celebrate them being healthy again. And it feels like it feels sad when you see what happened to Liam Payne, for example, because it almost, you're really rooting for them. At least I feel like I'm really rooting for these people to not just be famous, but to live really good, happy, rich lives. And so when you see people, you know, someone like Billie Eilish, you almost feel protective, because you really want her to not just be a great singer, you want her to have someone who loves her. And, you know, like, as a random person, you can't actually give that to any of these people. They're famous, you know. But when you know that they have someone in their life who's really like gunning for them and protecting them and looking out for them and giving them advice that is unattached from monetary gain, but just, hey, like, I love you, I want you to be happy kind of advice. And that's why I feel like I'm really lucky to have my husband. I'm really lucky to have my 2 kids. And, you know, when I close my computer and we go to the park, it's really happy. And I think that in that way, having a really rich life outside of any of this, and, you know, maybe the day will come that nobody is watching my videos, or I decide to stop posting, and it's really, I think, helpful that I get to have that outside of what this is, because not everybody does. I think some people who do well online, or have some viral content, or even just get real famous, actually famous, you know, they really don't have anyone who's kind of beside them to say, hey, I'm rooting for you no matter what happens with your fame, or your internet fame, or your virality, or anything like that. The other thing I wanted to give some context for is just to the extent of how this is so unexpected. I kind of talked about it at the beginning of the video, where I always had a dream to write a book. And if you're familiar with my story, you remember my dad gave me a priesthood blessing that I should become a teacher. And so after I got that blessing, I fully just threw in the garbage all of the other dreams or aspirations I had had across the course of my life. From, I had loved biology at one point, and I loved writing, I had painting, I loved all of these things. As soon as I got that blessing that I should be a teacher, an high school English teacher, I just decided that I was gonna pursue that path, because that was what God, a priesthood blessing is essentially someone speaking for God. So it felt to me like a personal commandment that I should pursue this path. And after I left the church, I still was a teacher for a long time after that. I even went on to be an assistant principal for a year, and it still felt like, my 9 to 5 is fully dominated by this choice I made to become a teacher because I had a teaching license, and that was really the best and kind of only way I knew how to make money. That was a salaried position with benefits. I basically just continued to be a teacher even after leaving the church, because that was now, that's my profession. I have my certificate, I have my degree in that, and so I had continued on this path even after leaving, because this is kind of now this is what I'm left with. And all those years, because it was years of being a teacher, I was in education for about 7 years, I would just fantasize about writing a book, and that was kind of my real dream, but I just never had time, working the hours of a teacher, having kids. It just felt like this fantasy that I was never gonna be able to, I would just dream of maybe someday when I'm retired, I'll write a book. And there came a point where after my second son was born, I've told the whole story in another video, but basically I decided not to return back to work, and I decided that I would write a book instead. But I had a newborn at that point, and so I basically was caring for a newborn, caring for my other son, who was about 4 at that point, but is now 6. This was a few years ago. And as I'm doing this, I would wake up, at 5 a.m. to write this book. And we didn't really, because I wasn't working and we went from 2 incomes to 1 income, we didn't really have the money for childcare. So I basically would just, after the kids were in bed, I'd write my book. I'd wake up early, write my book, maybe nap time, write my book. So I was working on it in maybe 1 to 2 hour stints, for a few years. When I was about 75% of the way through the book, I realized that it was because the book it's just for ex-Mormons, basically. It's a pretty small group of people who the book is for. It's for people who have left the Mormon church. And so I tried to get a publisher. Nobody was really interested. I got an indie publishing contract, but the terms weren't very good. And I felt like I just wanted to take the contract just so I could say I had a publisher, which isn't really actually a good reason to do something, for vanity. So I ended up saying, okay, well, maybe if I can, have some well-known people review the book and put their, kind of their stamp of approval on it, I can sell more copies, and I'll just self-publish on Amazon. And I DM'd all of these people who I really looked up to: Jeremy Reynolds, John DeLynn, Tyler Glenn, these people who had been very instrumental in my exit from the church, and no one responded to me, which was not that surprising. Who am I? I'm just some random person at that point. Literally no one even responded to me. So I just realized that if I wanted people to care about the book, if I wanted people to read the book, I was gonna have to make some people care about me first, and kind of forge my own path in a sense, before either well-known people were gonna care about me, or just people who were interested in reading the book would want to care about my book. So at that point, ex-Mormon TikTok was really huge, and so I said to myself, okay, I'm gonna start posting on TikTok with the intent that I will have some people interested in my story, interested in some of the messages, you know, I'll share some of the ideas that are in the book, and maybe I'll have a larger audience of people who I can say, hey, I just wrote my book, please consider checking it out. And so with the intent to get an audience to share my book with, I started first just posting on TikTok and just little videos just like I kind of do now, just little interesting tidbits of information or argumentation or critique or whatever. And at first it was really hard because there was a lot of negative comments and I tried to respond to them. I would argue back and forth, and I've had to kind of step away from that over time as I've realized how futile that is, but also just what a time suck it is that you're just arguing with people over TikTok comments. While I'm posting, I'm continuing to write, and my very first ever truly viral TikTok video was about how when I used to work at the BYU library, the Harold B. Lee Library, and there was a room that was this closed off room from the typical students that had different kind of restricted section type books that were stuck in this room. And because of my job, sometimes people would request to check out those books, and my job was to go and get books from all over the library. It was interlibrary loans, but sometimes the requests would be for this specific room. And I remember asking when I first got hired my boss at the time, hey, what's in this room? What types of books are kept here? And the two different categories that I thought, one was just really expensive books, but two other categories that he said was one that they had to keep biology books in there, especially anatomical biology books, because students would censor the books with Sharpies and would destroy or at least damage the books because they would go and say, oh, this has pictures of you know, the human body, so I need to censor out with a Sharpie or cut the book so that I'm removing the offensive parts because this is essentially the Lord's university and these books should not be in this library. So they had issues with that. And then the other type was disfavorable church history that would happen as well. The books were basically kept from the students, not necessarily even because the students were being restricted from this information, even though that also happens, but also because the library needed to protect the books from the students because the students would sometimes damage these books that had disfavorable church history and damage the books that had immodest or salacious photos of human biology. So anyways, I told that story in a TikTok video, and that was my first ever viral TikTok video. And I remember I posted it, and then I went to do a yoga class, and I came out of my yoga class and I saw that, I don't remember how many views it was. At that point, even 10,000 views still felt massive, and I think it was maybe 50,000 views, or it was, you know, it was just a high enough number that I had never seen anything get that many views before, and I just almost dropped my phone in shock because it was so that I had never seen a number that big. At that point, I started getting really nervous because I wanted to kind of maintain the momentum, but I felt really afraid or nervous of failing. My husband gave me some really good advice, which I still stick to this day, which is to try as much as possible to not focus on views, but just to keep asking myself, okay, what video am I making next? I've done that a lot now, where instead of thinking about negative comments, or instead of thinking about if my views are up or if my views are down, I really have gotten pretty good about quieting that voice to just stop talking to me and focus a lot more on what do I want to talk about next? What do I want to say about it? What's important? What needs to be said, or what haven't I said yet, or what topic would be interesting to share, or a new perspective. So instead of focusing so much on views or metrics, I've really tried to hone in on the skill of just saying, okay, what am I gonna make a video about next? And I just keep doing that, and so far that has worked pretty well at quieting some of this anxiety. I mean, when videos were first going viral, I would be awake in the middle of the night, kind of hyperventilating, just watching this unfold before me and feeling anxiety that I couldn't reproduce it, or I couldn't come up with another video concept, or this was just a fluke, or my family was gonna find it, or I just had, so many thoughts just coursing through my brain. And then I just practiced, okay, I just need to, what am I gonna make a video about next? And I'll just throw the dart at the wall and see what sticks, and just say what I believe and be unapologetic, and hopefully that speaks to some people. And I think so far that's been more helpful as far as a mindset than at first. I mean, if you're doing what I asked at the beginning, which is putting myself in your shoes, I mean, imagine seeing that anything you've made gets 1 million views when you've never done anything like this before. My jaw just dropped to the ground whenever this would happen. It just felt unreal. And it still, I think, does in many ways. My goal when I went on my Mormon Stories interview was to get I wanted to get 10,000 TikTok followers by the time I went on Mormon Stories, so that I could say, hey, if you've seen my TikTok, check out my book. If you've seen my book, check out my TikTok. Just so that I could have something to show for, like, hey, I'm not just like some random person. I have a little bit of a presence online. And I think I hit 10,000 followers on TikTok maybe like a few months before I went on my Mormon Stories interview. And honestly, by the time I got to 10,000, I think I just blacked out from anxiety as far as numbers go. Now it's almost like I don't really see the numbers. It's so big. Once something feels so big, it just starts to feel like you can't process it. And that's how it's felt for me in the last year. Kind of like you're standing under the stars and you're trying to count them. Once something is so big, you just give up. And I just feel like I went from really carefully, I would be looking at my follower count and be really excited. And once it hit 10,000, I was kind of like, that was my goal all along. I've certainly never had 10,000 followers before, so this is really just uncharted territory. And then when it just kept growing after that, I just felt like I just kind of blacked out emotionally, just like, this is incomprehensible. I don't understand what's happening right now. And I will say, I just looked it up. I have sold 2,989 copies of the book since it was published in early January. In 2024 is when I first hit the publish button. And so it's been about 10 months. So I've sold almost 2,989 copies. And so that plan to use social media as a way to reach people really has worked in ways that I 100% did not even expect it to. And thank you to anyone who has purchased a copy of the book. I will share too, it's been really cool how many people have said they are not Mormon, they're not ex-Mormon, but they are ex-Pentecostal, ex-Jehovah's Witness, ex-Muslim, ex-whatever, and that they've still derived a lot of value from the book. So thank you to anyone who's ever purchased a copy. I really appreciate it. And you've literally made my dreams come true of being an author who has a book that people have read and loved. Another weird part of this has definitely been the fact that I have now made money off of social media. Like I said, this started as a dream project that I think my dream was just, hey, I want to write a book and have some people who aren't just my friends read the book. And so everything that's happened outside of that dream, just having people read the book who aren't my family or friends, ex-Mormon family, that everything outside of that, those are my dreams. My biggest dream was to get 10,000 followers on TikTok and to have some people read the book outside of my social circle that is ex-Mormon. And everything that's happened has been so much bigger than that it's been hard to count the stars in the sky. Whenever my TikTok first got monetized, I can't remember. I think once you get 10,000 followers, you can monetize it. So I was like, okay, I'll monetize it and, see what happens. And I think the first day I made $20. And you know, I hadn't had a job where I made money. I had the job of being a stay-at-home parent to a newborn. I hadn't made my own money in about a year and a half at that point. We were just living off my husband's income. And when I made that first $20, I remember, you know, going and showing my husband and saying, like, oh, like I can buy us like pizza tonight. This is so exciting. And, you know, it was just, I just was gobsmacked by the fact that you can even make any money on the internet at all. Seemed made up to me. And I am really proud to say that I've now fully replaced the income that I would have had as a teacher and then some, and I can now do this much more sustainably. We now have some money, you know, kind of additional income for childcare again. So my younger son, who's 2, goes to part-time care, and then my older son, just started kindergarten. So it's been very weird in some ways because I feel like I kind of see what I do as somewhat entertainment. Some of it is definitely more entertainment minded, like my video about Mormon ballroom dancing, I feel like isn't really hard hitting, you know, let me talk about my religious experience in a critical way. It's more just a history lesson. I'm wearing my silly little ballroom gown that I purchased. But a lot of it is, I think, more activist minded, and so getting paid to do something like that is really fraught, in my opinion. There's some tension there where I feel like it's strange that I can make some money in this way, but also cool that there's a way to do this sustainably in a way that I can keep making videos and I don't have to just cram this into my free time. I can actually make a kind of a living off of this. And it's also cool that I, at least as long as this keeps up, you know, really don't need to go back to being a teacher, which was kind of one of my dreams all along, was to get off the track of being a teacher in a school, because I had pursued that purely because of my father's blessing. And I do still hope to soon start working on a second book. That's my hope, and maybe with my even larger following, I can get it traditionally published, which would be super cool. Many people have noted that even though I don't want to be a teacher, that I still am a teacher in a sense in my YouTube channel, which I do find that to be kind of funny, and I guess the fulfillment of a prophecy in another way, which is that I'm still teaching, just not a high school English teacher or, you know, teaching in a public school. I'm teaching about Mormonism. I think it's kind of beautiful to see how I've taken this thing that I had, which is my teaching certificate, and said, okay, I'm gonna run with it. I can't, you know, when you leave the church, the Mormon church, I think when you leave behind something that's big from your past, you kind of naturally have a lot of thoughts about, what if I hadn't ever been a member? What would my life be like if I hadn't been forced into these different paths, and if I had more encouragement to seek lots of different opportunities? And I think a lot of those thoughts often are just spinning your wheels because you just can't change the past. And this is my life that I have now. I became an elementary school teacher. I moved to New York, you know, and I think life becomes its own beautiful pathway after leaving the church, for me at least, that I feel like, even though maybe had I never been Mormon, none of my life would be radically different. But the truth is, I feel like the ability to take your life from what was given to you as a kid or what you were raised to be, and then say, how do I take who I am now and work in a way that then is kind of placing myself on a path that maybe if I wasn't raised in the church, I wouldn't be here at all. But now that I'm here, how do I turn this into something beautiful? I guess I'm describing, you know, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, because ultimately, who knows who I would be if I hadn't been Mormon. But the truth is that I was raised Mormon, and here I am with my YouTube channel. I have my family. I live in this random area in San Antonio. You know, life is in no way what I expected it to be when I was still a member of the church. And I recently read a questionnaire that I had answered when I was 21, and it said, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I said, I want to live in Utah and be married and have 1 or 2 kids. And, you know, life is definitely not what I am dreaming it will be in that questionnaire that I put into that time capsule. But the me that is here now feels really happy with the life that I've chosen. And even though I've shared a lot of the more bittersweet aspects of the life I've chosen, it's still so much the life I chose, you know. I've just decided that I never want to live for anyone else ever again. And even if choosing to live for myself means that they choose not to talk to me anymore, I think that it's an okay trade-off, and it's a painful trade-off, and it really sucks, but I don't want to live for anyone else ever again. I guess I'm saying all of this to share that maybe when I first left the church, it felt like I was going to be a teacher for the rest of my life, and I was stuck with it. And starting this YouTube channel and writing my book that I can hold in my hands has made me just realize that, hey, if you know, this whole journey has taken me almost now 10 years. It didn't happen overnight. It took me 2 years to write this book. It took me a year of posting on social media, which even still was very fast. I totally recognize, but I think that sometimes when you have a dream, it can feel so very far away. And you know, I didn't have the money to quit my job right away. I had to work in a job that I really didn't like for many years, but I feel like when you have a dream and you try to figure out how to make it work, you know, we lived on a single income for a long time so that I could write my book. That's another reason why my husband has made such a difference in my life, is that when I said I want to write a book, he said, I'm here, I support you. And he also never knew I would be able to make a living off of social media, off of YouTube. He just said, hey, you want to write a book? You should write a book. I believe in you. And when I said, I DM'd all these people to try to get them to review my book and no one responded, he said, that doesn't mean that your book is bad. It just means you have to think about how to connect with them in a way that will make them listen. And, you know, what do you think you should do? How do you think, what is your dream? What do you want? How could you do that? You know, he's just asking me questions that say, hey, I'm here to support you. What do you think you should be doing? And how do you want to do it? And I think that sacrifice that we made and that he made to just be on one income has now meant that I see all of these kind of fruits of the labor, and his support of me has really made it so that I can live this dream that I really never expected to live. And that's why I think it's another good reason to surround yourself, or as much as you can, to find people who love you and support you regardless of what your dreams are, or love you and support you regardless of your identity or your job or your, you know, whatever you want to put on the list, but someone who says, hey, I love you and I want to help you live your dream because I want you to be happy. And so all of that brings us to the here and now. I am about to turn 32 and I have about, whatever I said at the beginning, 650 plus thousand subscribers, followers across these platforms. And so now that I've not only achieved my dream of writing a book and having 10,000 TikTok followers, the sky feels kind of like the limit, and it's been very strange to try to figure out what to do next. I've had people say, hey, if you ever want to make videos about other topics, it'd be interesting to watch. To some extent, that feels really scary because I just feel like I have my niche and I know what I know what I know, and I've spent so much of my life being Mormon, and it's kind of feels like second nature to just talk about or know the doctrine and know so much of the history. And so stepping outside of that, there's obviously so many things I have opinions about or could talk about or research. And so it's been a little intimidating though to try to figure out if it's something I should do to step outside of this topic, or if I should just keep with my niche and just say, okay, this is, I'm just going to keep making videos on this topic. So I think I'm still kind of trying to figure out if that's something I should do, or if I should just say, hey, I have my thing, I'm gonna keep talking about my thing. It is strange to have to find the balance between making videos that I think people will find interesting, but also to not be owned by other people's opinions about what they think I should be doing. You know, all the time people have so many opinions about making videos longer, making videos shorter, talking about this subject instead of that subject. I had someone join my Patreon who literally DM'd me and basically said that they wanted to see some PORN, and that's what they were expecting me to post on my Patreon. And I was like, nope. Sorry, it's basically just the same old, same old. I didn't start an OnlyFans, I started a Patreon. And they said, you know, I'm gonna cancel my subscription because you aren't providing what I thought you were going to be providing. And it's so like the audacity of someone to just be DMing me and say, hey, I joined your Patreon, so I deserve to see content like this. And if you don't make content like that, I'm going to cancel my subscription. And I just refunded them and said, goodbye, you know, see yourself out, basically. And so I think trying to figure out how to say, you know, that it's not the tail wagging the dog here. I'm saying what I think, and I'm addressing the subjects that I think need to be addressed. I think a lot of people really want me to say I'm a Christian, or that I've joined some other sect. You know, I have a lot of people saying, try Catholicism, try this branch of Christianity, consider being a Muslim. You know, I think religious content or kind of religious critique content attracts lots of religious traditions. And so I have so many people who are really gunning for me to try, especially just Christianity at large or in general. I know I'm letting you guys down by being an atheist, and I apologize for letting you down, but I'm not going to change my beliefs or my lack thereof just to, you know, get more views or to fit someone else's worldview or their narrative. And so I think that's been another thing, is to say, hey, I'm still the one. If I'm gonna have to sit here and say the words that are gonna eventually come out of my mouth, I might as well just make sure that those words are things that I truly do believe in. And I'm not trying to say things or say something that the audience will be more interested in or will like me more for, but just that I'm really saying what I actually believe, and that probably isn't gonna make everyone happy because it's the internet. You're not gonna make everyone happy. If you're still with me here at the end, thank you so much for following my content, for subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate every single person who's ever left a comment or watched my videos, or, like I said, checked out the book. It really means the absolute world to me. I think it also is super important because it means that my content can be shared with even more people who are struggling with a faith crisis, people who are trying to decide if they should go on a Mormon mission, or people who are leaving any religious tradition and are just looking for voices of people who are saying, you're not alone, it's really hard, you're not a bad person because you're leaving your family's religious tradition. There are many people out there like you, and we all have experienced a lot of the same things, and it doesn't mean you're not a good person. It doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. It means that you are striking out on a new path for yourself, and that is very admirable. Please consider subscribing if you have not already. I make a new video every single week, and as always, I will see you all next week.